It's time for more Manifesting Original Rich Bitch Experiences. Each week, we're talking travel, wellness, and millennial musings with a level of refinement. What level? It fucking depends. I'm your host, Ava Bilkey. Welcome back to the More Pod. We are coming up on potentially the busiest air travel timeframe of all time. Travel industry officials and the TSA are predicting record volumes of travelers this summer. We're talking peaks at 3 million passengers a day. And this volume is set to exceed that of popular holidays like Thanksgiving. That's a big deal. And what happens when volumes are super high is that it really puts pressure on the whole airport system. This pressure comes in the form of oversold flights, really crowded flights, staff shortages, strikes, delays, cancellations, lost baggage. It's not a cute look when volumes are this high. If you're flying somewhere and you experience some of these side effects, if you will, of really busy air travel, it becomes really frustrating. People who are frustrated in the travel process typically get pretty crabby. And when people get crabby, they're not very nice to their fellow passengers. On top of this hectic travel time, I think people are just generally lacking in socialization. It's almost like people forgot how to act around other people. This is the perfect storm for an absolute shit show flight experience. So I thought it would be the perfect time to talk about plane etiquette. Plane etiquette 101 and the things that I think would make flying more enjoyable for all of us this summer and beyond. So let's get into it. I could talk all day about airport and airport security etiquette, so I think that will be its own episode. I want to start with the process of boarding the plane. And from boarding the plane, go through all of the in-flight etiquette that it would benefit all of us to keep in mind so that ideally we can create a more positive and enjoyable flight experience. So, boarding the plane is really where this party starts. And when it comes to boarding the plane, I think the most important piece of etiquette that we can all keep in mind is that it's important to board the plane when it's your turn to board the plane. I know that every airline boards their planes, they divide the planes by different classes and cabins and sections, and it can be kind of confusing. However, I would argue that there is a general order to boarding a plane. Typically, what happens is you get in line and you board the plane according to the section that you're sitting in. For some reason, this is one of the most confusing processes for people. It seems like as soon as a plane starts boarding, it turns into the Hunger Games. People are rushing the gate, they're budging in order, they're boarding at first class, even though they're sitting in the back of the plane. It's like all hell breaks loose. And I'm not quite sure why, because most of the time you have an assigned seat. And if you don't have an assigned seat on an airplane, you have a ticket that says you have a seat on the plane. So, like, what are we all rushing about here? I've never understood this, but this whole boarding the plane process, it really sets the vibe for the entire flight. Everyone that you encounter in the boarding process is going to be on the same plane as you. So I think it's important to be mindful of the way that you're boarding the plane and getting on the plane when it is your turn. Now, when it comes to in flight etiquette, we have a lot to talk about. First and foremost, I think it's important that we respect each other's boundaries and personal space. Now, when you take a flight, you have a seat, and this airplane seat essentially dictates what is your personal space. These spaces are really small, right? Like these airlines, these planes, they're really packing us in. That is an issue in and of itself. However, we all find ourselves in these very small bounds, if you will. So, until these airlines give us more personal space, we really have to be mindful. And when it comes to respecting personal space, I think it would benefit every airline passenger to really imagine their own personal bubble. Let's talk about what's in that bubble: your airplane seat, your seatbelt, your armrest, your tray table, and your belongings. So that is the bubble. This means that man spreading beyond that bubble is not acceptable. What is man spreading? For those of you who don't know, man spreading is basically stretching out beyond your bubble. This could be somebody overstretching their legs. They've got their knees pointed outward. Maybe their like shoulders or their arms are kind of like spilling over your armrest. Anything that makes you feel like the person next to you is almost touching you or invading your personal space, that, my friend, is manspreading. And manspreading is not proper plane etiquette. And it's hard to be in the mind of a manspreader, right? Like, I really don't know what the thought process is. But if I had to guess, the people who do this must feel entitled to extra space. That, or they're just so completely unaware of themselves that they don't even realize that they're doing it. Manspreading is completely inappropriate. And if you happen to be sitting next to a manspreader, and by the way, this is not gender specific, you should address it if this happens to you. Obviously, politely, but just asking someone if they could, keep to their own space a little bit or point out the fact that their foot is, on your backpack. The manspreaders have to be stopped. And I think the best way to do so is to start calling them out in a respectful way. On the topic of armrests, though, I do think it's important to allocate the two middle armrests to whoever has to sit in the middle seat. Their personal space is much harder to define outside of the window or the aisle. And it sucks to sit in the middle seat. I don't think that's anyone's first choice, obviously. So let's practice some proper plane etiquette by allowing the middle seat the middle two armrests. The last thing when it comes to respecting people's space in your bubble, your seat area, is to be mindful of what you're putting in the carry on storage space, where your feet go. Because this space is for your one personal item. Whether you've chosen to bring a backpack or a laptop bag or a purse, whatever it is that you've chosen as your personal item. Maybe your personal item is a dog, which we'll get into later, but that is really the only thing that should be going in that space. Everything else should be kept in the overhead bins because, again, if you're trying to shove too much stuff in that little space, you're spilling into other people's bubbles. And it's not proper plane etiquette. The next incredibly important piece of plane etiquette is to Wear headphones at all times. Under no circumstance should anybody else on the plane hear what you're doing on your phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on the screen in the seat in front of you. Headphones, people. We need headphones. And look, we all have those accidental moments, right? You think your AirPods are connected, you think your headphones are plugged in, you start streaming a movie, or you press play on that album you're listening to, and shit. Next thing you know, your neighbor is listening to you blare Adele. It's embarrassing. We know it's not intentional, but don't let that happen if you can avoid it. We might not all have the same music taste, you know? I find that for some reason, people of all ages who play games on their phones somehow think that they are an exception to the headphones rule. I don't care if you are 5 years old or 55 years old. Nobody needs to hear the solitaire shuffle coming off of your phone. All of those noises associated with those games, like that also has to be streamed through your headphones. And like I said, I don't care how old you are. If you are a child playing on an iPad, you also need to be wearing headphones. Like, this is the hardest, fastest etiquette rule. And there's nothing more frustrating when somebody is playing solitaire out loud on the airplane. It's important to add here that we should also be paying attention to the volume of our headphones. Now, I know that the plane is a loud place, right? The engine's loud, the jet stream, the wind is loud, everything's loud. So, chances are that when you're listening to something on the plane, the volume's turned up a little bit higher than you would typically have it in any other setting. However, I think it's also important to make sure that you're not blaring your headphones so loud that people can hear what's in your headphones. If your headphones are so loud that I can still hear what you're listening to, it's almost like you're not wearing them. It's almost like you're not wearing the headphones, which is even crazier. So, all of us need to do the best that we can to make sure that any noise coming from our devices stays in our own eardrums. The next piece of etiquette is potentially controversial. However, if you are on a short haul or a medium haul flight, anything like under 5 hours, there is absolutely no need to be reclining your seat. There is nothing worse than when the person in front of you kicks back their seat as soon as you hit 10,000 feet. I really don't understand the thought process of seat reclining. Long haul flights are different. If we're, flying overnight, 6, 7, 12 hours and sleep is anticipated, then we can all recline our seats. But on your average daily flight of 3 hours, there is absolutely no need to recline your seat. The problem that comes from reclining your seat is, one, you automatically cut into that personal space of the person behind you. And two, it's actually hazardous. So if you recline your seat and the person behind you is, say, working on their laptop or enjoying a cup of shitty coffee in the air, and you just kick back that seat, you're causing a disruption for them that they were not anticipating. And you could potentially ruin someone's computer. You could spill a drink. I mean, if you think about it, reclining your seat is an incredibly irresponsible thing to do. I don't think that we should expect to get comfy or cozy on an airplane. You know, we should be sitting upright, minding our own space. And if for some reason you absolutely have to recline your seat, at minimum, it's proper plane etiquette to give the person behind you a heads up. Ask them if it's okay. Tell them that you're going to be reclining your seat, and that gives the person a chance to pick up their coffee, move their computer, like prepare for impact, basically, because that's just a respectful thing to do. Similar to seat reclining, I feel like window shades are another one of those hot topic trigger items. I mean, who would have ever thought that what you do with a window shade directly next to you on an airplane could send so many ripples? So, window seats on the airplane are probably the most a viable seat. I mean, it's probably a toss up, honestly, between window and aisle, but the window seats arguably have more power than the aisle seats. So, for the fun of it, we're going to say that the window seats are the hottest seats in the house. Part of what makes window seats so great is that you get to look out. You get to stare into air in space and have a really cool meditative moment about the fact that you are traveling through the air in an airplane. And I think one of the funnest parts about traveling is looking out the window and looking at the earth below you and the sky above you. And it's very rare that you get that opportunity to have a change in perspective. I always love when the plane gets above the clouds and automatically you see the sun. I think that's so cool. And for me, at that point in a flight, I always think about the fact that it's always sunny somewhere. And no matter what you're going through, you can have that instant change in perspective. And if everyone closes their window shades, you don't get that experience. Proper plane etiquette, in my view, is to keep the window shades open. Nothing is more frustrating to me if I am not in a window seat and the person that has the window seat in my row just automatically closes that window for the whole flight. Let the people live. You already don't have the best seat in the house and now you can't see out the window. That is so incredibly frustrating. Now, I was recently on a flight where the woman sitting next to me seemed to have the opposite viewpoint on windows and window shade etiquette. So, my viewpoint is the window shades should be open at bare minimum for takeoff and touchdown, and really ideally throughout the flight, unless there's I don't know, unless the angle of the sun is just so offensive that it's blinding you. That would be really the only time where I think that the shade should be shut. So I was recently on a flight and I had a window seat. And the woman next to me, she was in the middle seat, right? So we have to give her a little bit of extra grace. But she expected me to close the shade. She didn't ask me to close the shade for probably the first half of the flight. But I did sense her kind of looking at me, or kind of I felt the energy was off. But again, she didn't say anything to me, so I didn't really know what her problem was. And obviously, I was minding my bubble. So I'm I'm not man spreading on her space. So eventually, halfway through the flight, she asked me if I could close the shade. And I said, "Oh, I can close that partially. I mean, I would like it open, but if you'd like it closed, I'll close it partially." I don't know why she wanted it closed. She was just reading a book. When I closed the shade, she then immediately went to turn on her reading light. And I was like, "Why are we blocking out the natural light so that you can turn on the artificial light?" For me, that just doesn't really make sense. But she was pissed that I had my window shade open to the extent that when we got off the plane, she had met up with someone who she must have been flying with who was sitting elsewhere. And they were right in front of me walking off the plane. And I heard her bitching to her friend about me not closing the window. This was an experience that I had that opened my eyes to the fact that some people actually expect the opposite plane etiquette when it comes to windows. They expect them to be shut, which was surprising for me. I don't know. Like, don't you like the windows open? Or am I just alone in that? There's no way I'm alone in that. I think we keep the windows open. That's the proper plane etiquette. If you think otherwise, let me know. And let me know why you think otherwise, because it is something I would like to understand. But for right now, for the purposes of this podcast, I think the proper etiquette is to keep the windows open. If you have a window seat, you've got that power, you've got that responsibility. At least make sure they're open for takeoff and touchdown. Make your fellow passengers happy. Give them a view. Give them the air show. Because there are very few benefits to flying these days. Like, the view has to be one of them. Food is another area that I think could use a discussion when it comes to proper etiquette. I understand that we all get hungry on a flight, and sometimes the airline provided snacks are simply not enough. I think every time I get on an airplane, that bag of Sun Chips shrinks 50% every single time. It's wild how small those airplane snacks are. So, if you're on a flight, I think it's actually a smart idea to bring some snacks with you. And in the spirit of being considerate of your fellow passengers and making the flight experience more enjoyable for everyone, it is worth considering what snacks you choose to bring on the plane. Because let's face it, we are all breathing the same air on that plane. And some food stinks up the place really fast, and that's not an enjoyable experience. I think the most offensive thing that you can do is bring fast food onto the plane. Look, I know we're under a lot of stress, and a Big Mac might sound like the solution. The problem is the fast food, when you bring it on the plane, I mean, you can smell that from a mile away. And fast food doesn't always smell good. You know, I'm not interested in the fact that somebody 10 rows behind me is eating Chick-fil-A. I don't need to know that. I think it's important to be mindful of the food that you do bring on the plane. What would be less offensive than fast food? Anything that the airline serves: cookies, peanuts, pretzels, granola bars, protein bars, any sort of a dry snack is totally cool. Dry snacks are the best snacks to have on airplanes because they don't smell. They're not as messy. Nobody's going to notice if you're having chips. I mean, they might notice chips because you might hear them, but probably not. But nobody's going to notice if you're eating a granola bar on a plane. Everyone is going to notice if you're eating Pizza Hut on the plane. Let's stick to dry snacks as proper plane etiquette here. If you want to be healthier and you're like, I'm not trying to eat chips or pretzels or a granola bar on the plane, I think we can also make an exception for certain produce. I'm talking self-contained fruits and vegetables. Examples of self-contained fruits and veggies are an apple, a banana, I don't know, maybe celery, carrot sticks, something that isn't messy, that isn't overly pungent, that is something that you would find served on a plane and that can be consumed discreetly. I think that's the key here. Bring snacks on the plane that you can consume discreetly, and nobody will have a problem. The next thing we need to talk about is proper etiquette for using the restroom on the airplane. If somebody in your row needs to get up to use the restroom, it is proper plane etiquette to stand up to let somebody out of the row that you're sitting in. Do not make them crawl over your lap. That is so disrespectful. Getting up is actually really healthy. It gives you a great opportunity to stretch your legs, get your blood flowing a little bit, and it's really just proper etiquette. But this seems to be something that people have really lost sight of. I don't know about you, but I feel like when you have to get up and maybe, you're not in the aisle, when you have to get up and you kind of like nudge or like look at the people sitting next to you, it's like you've asked them to run a marathon or something. Like, how dare you ask so much of the person you're sitting next to? And I don't know where or when that happened, but that's just mind boggling to me. I think we really need to get back to, again, it's etiquette, it's proper, like it's showing just basic human respect and kindness. If you have to go to the bathroom, like stand the fuck up and let the person get up without crawling over your lap. End rant. I never thought I'd have to say something like this, but after you use the restroom, it is also proper etiquette to put down the seat if you have raised the toilet seat. This is something that I thought humans knew and abided by, but I can't tell you how many times I go into the restroom on an airplane and the seat is up. Come on, people. Come on. Proper plane etiquette says put down the fucking toilet seat after you use it. Also, an important detail, mentionable, if you will, is I think it's really nice to dry off the water splashes around the sink area after you use it. So if you wash your hands and you happen to splash water around, it's okay. But it's even better if you take one of those paper towels and just sort of dry it off because it's really gross to go and, wash your hands in the sink with like just water dripping everywhere. And then there's like wetness on the ground. You don't know if it's urine or water, and it just creates a very uncomfortable environment. So I think an honorary mention goes to drying off the sink counter area after you've used it. Now, this one, I do feel like I'm asking a lot of people, and that's kind of sad. This is something that I don't even know if this could ever really if this could ever really take root, but I think it is something that we should all consider doing because it just keeps things feeling, tidy. It keeps things feeling clean. And that's what we all want. We want to feel clean. And if you have to use the restroom on an airplane, which by the way, like that's done out of necessity, that's not really done for fun. That is like, if I have to use the restroom on this airplane, like, please let it be a clean experience. I think we can all do our part to make that a cleaner experience for everyone. When it comes to overhead bins, this seems to be one piece of etiquette that the airlines really do kind of drill in on. So I don't know how much I have to say here, but there is a specific way to put your carry-on luggage in that overhead bin. And, there's a lot of announcements and instruction given around not putting extra things in those bins until everyone has their carry-on in the bin. So I think we're pretty good on that front. But I will add that if you see somebody struggling to either put something in or take something out of the overhead bin, it is plain etiquette to ask them if they need help and to actually help them if they do need help. Because let's face it, not everybody is tall enough to reach those overhead bins. And even if height isn't an issue, not everybody has the upper arm strength to be lifting, a 30-pound bag in and out of an overhead bin. So I think that it would be really lovely if we could all get back to the plain etiquette of giving assistance to our fellow passengers if it seems like they're struggling with the overhead bins. Now, we do have some special situations that we need to address here. And by special situations, I mean kids and animals. I don't have any kids and I don't have any animals. So I realize that my view of proper etiquette here might be a little different than that of, say, a dog mom or a human mom, but let's just get into it. I understand the need to travel with children. I understand that they're not separate from their parents or guardians. And if parents and guardians are traveling, it's likely that they have to bring their kids with them, unless it's a work trip, of course. But while we're talking about general plane etiquette here for everybody, I think that parents and guardians have a responsibility to give kids a little plane etiquette lesson as well. So, if you are going to be traveling with a kid, I think that parents need to do a better job of teaching their kids what is and what is not acceptable plane behavior. What's not acceptable plane behavior for kids is kicking the seat in front of them, screaming, crying, throwing goldfish crackers, playing iPad games without headphones on. Basically, kids need to respect the same personal space bubbles that adults do. This largely hinges on parents to make sure that their kids understand this etiquette. And again, I know that it has to be learned at some point, but there's nothing more frustrating when a parent brings a child on a plane and they really don't take any steps to try and control that situation. It's like if you're just letting your kid act like a wildebeest on the flight, that is so disrespectful. Parents have to give these etiquette lessons as well. I would also really enjoy it if airlines took additional steps to make certain areas of the plane adult only, almost like an adults only hotel. I think that certain areas of the plane should be reserved for people 18 plus. If you're sitting in first class, you've got shit to do. I don't know that that's an appropriate seating section for kids. I'm just going to say it. I think kids and families should have designated sections on the airplane. We all have different goals, different motives for our travels. There has to be a greater level of method to all of this madness because it's getting hectic out here, especially when etiquette has seemingly gone to shit. At the same time, I think it would also be beneficial to have a section for animals. Look, I'm not an animal hater. I grew up with pets. I love dogs. I think they're great. Do I think that they should be on the airplane? Not necessarily. On my last flight to LA, I actually had an experience that got me thinking about this plane etiquette because the woman sitting behind me brought a Pomeranian with her. Since she was sitting behind me, this fluffy ass Pomeranian ended up sitting basically under me. I'm allergic to certain kinds of dogs, and Pomeranians are definitely one of those dogs that I'm allergic to. And by the end of this flight to LA, I'm not kidding you when I say I had itchy eyes. Like I was sniffling, I was sneezing. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I was like, Ava, like it's all in your head. No, it really wasn't. It actually was because of the dog. And it got me thinking about plane etiquette for animals. It actually seems strange to me that the animals can just be intermingled and intermixed with all the people. And so this plane etiquette is less for us as travelers and maybe more for the airline. Is there a way that we can be more specific with the different needs of passengers on the plane and figure out a way for animals and kids and people? kids are people too, but and people to adults to all somehow take a flight together, but maybe have a little bit more order. I don't know. Maybe this one's a me problem. It just seems like something is off with the plane etiquette when it comes to kids and pets. I'm just saying. Let's think about that. So, the last piece of plane etiquette is around exiting the plane. This is another one of those Hunger Games type situations. Getting on and getting off the plane, it really is each and every person for themselves. And there is some fighting urgency to get off the plane. But the proper plane etiquette is to get off the plane when it is your row's turn. Always and forever, this has been how it works. We alternate sides of the plane, right? So either the left side row one gets off first or the right side row one gets off first. And then it goes row two and row two and row three and row three. That's how we exit the plane. Lately, it seems like whoever has an aisle seat is trying to get off the plane first. You know, as soon as the seatbelt sign is off, people are standing up, they're in the aisle, and they don't care what row they're in, but they're just trying to get off the plane as fast as possible. This obviously creates a problem for everyone else who is trying to exit the plane in a fashionable order here. Now, the one exception I think we need to make is that for those of people who are making a connecting flight and are potentially at risk of missing their flight. And I've been on some flights where the flight attendants will actually ask people to remain seated in those very urgent scenarios where they know they fucked up and they know that maybe half of their flight is about to miss the next flight. I've seen that happen, but it's rare. I do think that we need to be mindful of people who are making a connection but don't have that flight attendant permission, if you will. And the best way to do that is simply to just let the people know next to you that you're worried that you're going to miss your flight and ask them if you can exit ahead of them. It really comes down just to communication. And I think that personally, if someone had said that to me, I would have no problems. Like, yeah, go get it, good luck. But the problem is people don't often communicate, they're just getting up, they're pushing, and you don't really know what their deal is. So we all need to stick to the basic order of exiting a plane. But it would also be helpful to be a bit more mindful of those people who are in a hurry to make their next flight and go ahead and let them get off ahead of you if you have nowhere to be. So there we have it, a rundown of plane etiquette and the things that I think would make the in-flight experience more enjoyable for everybody. I know there are a couple of hot topics. We probably don't see eye to eye on reclining seats or maybe the window shades or maybe bringing your dog on the plane. However, I think the point is that it serves all of us to be just a bit more mindful of our fellow passengers, and especially in times of heightened volumes with so many people traveling and a lot of people probably traveling for the first time in a few years, it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think the best way to make it a bit less uncomfortable is to stick to our own boundaries, mind our own space, mind our own business, and practice proper respect for ourselves and our fellow passengers. If you feel like you know somebody who could use a little plane etiquette reminder, I don't know, maybe you send them this episode, But I guess that's not a very casual thing to do. Like, hey, you should listen to this before you get on your next flight. No, I hope it's a friendly reminder. And there are definitely some things that I need to work on too. You know, next time somebody wants me to shut the window, I'll try not to be too pissed about it. But there you have it. There's our plane etiquette 101. Let's transition into this week's Love It or Leave It. What am I loving this week? This week I enrolled in a 22-day intro to astrology course, and I've really been enjoying it. The way it works is there's 22 days of content, and each day I get a new video module. And these video modules are anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes long. And I've been prioritizing these basically first thing in the morning, after my morning routine, and before I start work for the day. And what I really love about it is taking the time to learn something new every day. It's not a regular part of my morning routine to incorporate learning. I mostly focus on journaling, but I've got to say, I love learning a little something every morning. I think it's a really nice way to kind of get your mind rolling in the morning, start off on an expansive note, and it's just the perfect amount of content, right? Because it's not too big of a commitment that I don't feel like I can fit it in. And it's just been really nice. So I'm loving learning in the morning through this 22-day astrology course. What I'm not loving this week, oh my God. Okay, let me tell you what I'm not loving. For the first time ever, I had a bit of a scare with a contact lens. I wear contact lenses maybe 30% of the time. A lot of the time, I'll just throw on my glasses, but on the rare occasion, I will wear contacts. And here's what happened. I took a shower with my contacts in, and I know that's basically illegal, but I didn't realize it until I was 3/4 through my shower. And so I was like, shit, my contacts are in. I'm going to take them out as soon as I get out of the shower. So what do? I hop out of the shower. I try to take out my contact lenses. Then I realize that my contact lenses have basically somehow, while I was in the shower, suction cupped to my eyeballs. And now might be an important time to mention that prior to training myself to learn how to wear contact lenses, I had a severe eyeball phobia. So, this moment for me is bringing up a lot of triggers. I'm stressed. I'm realizing that my contacts are stuck to my eyeballs. And before I smarten up to putting eye drops in my eyes to, get things moving again, one of them splits. And so effectively, there was a fragment of a contact lens that I believe was stuck in my eye. I finally got the lenses out, but I noticed that one of the lenses was missing a big chunk. Over the course of this week, I have I've been looking for this missing piece of contact because I'm like, I need to find it to make sure it's not in my eye. The conclusion that I have reached is that somehow magically the contact piece is not stuck in my eyeball. However, I just don't have that physical proof because I could not find that broken piece of contact lens. But what I did do is I got some eye wash. First time ever. I've never owned eye wash before, which was interesting. I did eye wash for a few days. I did some eye movement exercises, basically the things that Google tells you to do when you get a piece of a broken contact lens stuck in your eye. Now, at this point, I think it's safe to say it's not in my eye because there's nothing wrong with my eyeball. Like, thank God. It's not irritated, it's not red. I don't feel like there's anything in there anymore, but it does still bother me that I don't have that physical proof because I have not, and probably will never find that missing broken piece of contact. So I am not loving this at all. It caused me a lot of stress and worry and panic. And I don't like that, because I'm already a little like about contacts, anyways. And this was a semi traumatic experience. So let this be a reminder to one, never shower with contact lenses in. And two, realize that if you do this, there may be a chance that your contacts will be kind of suctioned to your eyeballs. And so don't try to take out your contact lenses when they are dry and stuck to your eyeballs because you might break a contact lens in half and it might go missing in your eye. Can you tell I was stressed? I'm still stressed about it, obviously. It was not fun, not loving it, but I'm happy to be on the other side. I'm happy to be on the other side. On that note, I think it's time to wrap the episode. I hope that you found this plain etiquette enjoyable. We are loving learning. We are leaving getting contacts stuck in your eyes. And that's all I've got. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I love when we get to spend time together every single week. It means the world to me. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star rating and review. Let me know what you liked. You can reach out, send me a DM at the More Pod on Instagram. Let me know your take on window shades, seat reclining, kids on planes. I'd love to hear them. And I'll see you next week. Listen to the More Pod every Wednesday as I share the things that make me more me and discover a thing or two to make you more you.